The December launch of Expedition 4647 will feature 2 space veterans and 1 first-time flyer to the International Space Station. NASA astronaut Tim Kopra will serve as a flight engineer for Expedition 46, the same role the West Point graduate served in 2009 during Expedition 20. Tim will become the station commander for Expedition 47. ESA astronaut Tim Peake will also serve as a flight engineer. Tim is a test pilot with over 3,000 flight hours on more than 30 types of aircraft. He will be the first British astronaut to visit the space station. The Soyuz commander will be veteran cosmonaut Yuri Malenchenko. Yuri has spent 641 days in space and has spent over a day working outside in space during 5 spacewalks. Yuri first flew in space in 1994 on the Mir 16 mission. This crew will spend 6 months on the station, with a scheduled landing in May of 2016.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at NASA Johnson Space Center. We are excited to be joined by the Expedition 4647 crew, who will be heading to the International Space Station with their launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan on December 15th. With us today, we have veteran astronaut Tim Kopra of NASA, who will be the flight engineer for Expedition 46 and commander of Expedition 47. We also have veteran cosmonaut Yuri Malenchenko of the Russian Federal Space Agency, who will be the Soyuz commander, as well as flight engineer for Expeditions 46 and 47. And astronaut Tim Peake of the European Space Agency. Tim will be the second Brit astronaut to go to space and the first to fly to the International Space Station. Tim will also be a flight engineer for Expeditions 46 and 47. With that, let's turn to Tim Kopra. Tim, could you tell us a little bit about the major milestones that you'll have during your 5 months on orbit?
I'd be happy to. And before I do that, though, I'd like to say how happy I am that I get to fly with Yuri and Tim. Yuri has been a commander of both the Mir space station and the International Space Station, and Tim is an experienced experimental test pilot, as well as a fellow Apache helicopter pilot. So I'm very, very happy to have that opportunity. In terms of our mission, we're going to spend about 5 months on board space station. We'll have a plethora of resupply vehicles. Now they're getting on track again with the supply chain, as well as potentially a couple EVAs. But the primary job we have is for the utilization of space station, because now we have this orbiting laboratory, and we intend to do our job and to produce good science. So, Yuri, you'd like to say anything as well?
Ну да, конечно, я тоже очень рад быть в этом экипаже. И это для меня уже будет 6-й полет, и я с нетерпением его жду. Предстоит интересная работа. Мы сейчас заканчиваем подготовку, и очень скоро уже окажемся в космосе, и там будут и выходы в открытый космос, и обширная научная программа. Я ожидаю, что, как и каждый полет, всегда интересный, но этот полет будет очень интересный для нас.
Yes, of course. I'm very glad to be part of this expedition. It's going to be my 6th space flight. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a very interesting mission. We're going to have several EVAs, and it's going to be a very intense science research program. We're now completing training, and we're getting ready to launch pretty soon. Every space flight is a very interesting flight, and in this case, it's going to be a particularly interesting mission.
For myself, I consider myself really the lucky person in the room. I think not only to have the wonderful privilege of flying to space and representing the UK and the European Space Agency, but also having the privilege to fly with such an experienced and talented team. We've all done some great training over the last 2.5 years. Our ground teams and our training instructors have done a wonderful job in preparing us for this mission. And I think we're all now ready to go, ready to get started.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will now take questions for the crew. We'll start with media here at Johnson Space Center. Then we'll take questions from the reporters on the phone bridge, some social media questions that have been sent in to us here in Houston. And we also have some special guests in the audience from the Texas National Guard, the Wounded Warriors, some Georgia Tech alumni, and some NASA interns. If you'd like to ask a question on social media, please use the hashtag AskNASA. For the people on the phone bridge, please press *1 if you have a question, and *2 to withdraw your question if it's already been answered. Do we have any questions here in the room? Robert.
Hi, Robert Perlman with collectspace.com. With regards to your arrival on station, I think right now you're scheduled for a direct handover so that the station will have 9 people on board, or maybe that's not correct. Can you explain why the direct handover, if there's a particular reason in terms of timing, or if there's or why that handoff is being arranged that way?
That's a good question, Robert. Frankly, from a crew perspective, we're just happy that we get to spend time with the crew on board, have 9 people on board. It's a big station, and there's plenty of room, so we might as well have a full complement. In terms of why we're doing a direct handover, I think it's to give an opportunity for that crew to have a length of time since their flight was delayed into July, and I think we want to maximize the amount of utilization on station, and we can do that with 9 people very easily.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark Carrell, for Aviation Week. I think this is probably for Tim too. What do you expect the supply situation to be like? I know you're still kind of in the recovery mode, but do you sort of anticipate that and catch up in order to meet the research demands that you're looking at? What's your kind of anticipation of that?
You know, our anticipation in terms of the supply chain is that we're on track. In fact, we just had a briefing from our increment managers yesterday talking about the stock level of the supplies on board. And so we're looking really strong, especially once we have the next Progress vehicle get on board, and we anticipate OA4 to arrive soon as well.
Yes.
Eric Berger with the Houston Chronicle. A question for Tim as well. Could you talk a little bit about your disappointment in 2011 and kind of how you came back from that mentally, and now what it's like to actually be able to go finally fly again after that accident?
No, it's a fair question. You know, as you can probably imagine, there's probably not a bigger disappointment, especially for an astronaut, to lose a flight so close to the launch date. But you know, having some time separated between that event and this flight, I think I've actually gained an appreciation for the kind of job that we have. And not to say that I took my job for granted before, but I definitely am probably more grateful for this flight opportunity as a consequence.
Are you still biking?
Nope. I'm trying to live in bubble wrap until we launch.
Any other media questions here at Johnson? Can we go to social media?
We have some questions on Twitter. The first one is from Sienna Regan for Tim Kopra. How do you feel your training at West Point has helped you in your career as an astronaut?
You know, West Point is a very challenging environment for young people. The vast majority of the student body at West Point is between 18 and 22. Maybe someone had former military experience and goes a little bit later. But in general, it's a young group. And I think the thing that you learn that's most valuable from that experience is about getting your job done and being disciplined. The fact that it's a team effort. The common expression at West Point is cooperate and graduate, and I think that stuck with me. And then finally, perseverance, because you have to stick with it in order to make it through.
And we have another one from the Deputy British Ambassador, Patrick Davies, on Twitter, who wants to know from Tim Peake, what will you take with you into space to remind you of Britain?
We actually get a good allocation to take up with us, and I've got a number of things packed up with me. But I think in terms of what's going to remind me of Britain is the fact that I've been able to take up my choice of tea, and so I'll be having 2 cups of tea every day, which will definitely remind me of the UK.
Do we have any other questions here? Yes.
Okay. Jim Oberg with Spectrum magazine. You'll be arriving and you'll be there with the final few months of the year-long crew. I'd like to ask you all, especially Yuri, with your experience in long flights, what kind of things do you want to do to help the long-term crew get to the finish line?
Но действительно, это будет заключительный этап работы экипажа, который находится целый год на орбите, и в этот момент они уже обладают очень большим, значительным опытом работы на станции.
Indeed, it's going to be the final stage of the one-year mission, and by the time the crew of the one-year mission will have a very extensive experience of working on board of the ISS.
И в этом смысле нам с ними будет легко работать, потому что с нами рядом будет очень опытный, много знающий экипаж.
And in this sense, it will be easier for us actually to work side by side with the crew because they'll be very experienced and supportive colleagues.
Одновременно с этим экипаж, который проработал такое значительное время, он накапливает усталость, и это ожидается, я думаю, и для этого экипажа.
At the same time, for a crew who have been working on board for such an extensive period of time, they probably will have accumulated fatigue, and we're expecting this crew to have some of that as well.
Так что в этом смысле мы будем друг для друга очень полезны и будем помогать.
So in the sense, we're going to be very supportive of each other, and we're going to be helping each other.
Any other questions from Johnson Space Center?
Какие-нибудь еще вопросы?
Yes, ma'am.
This question is for anybody who would like to answer. What do you find gives you the mental fortitude to get through everything? I've learned so much about what it takes to become an astronaut today, and so what is there a particular memory or what drives you and what keeps you going?
I guess I could start with that question. It's a good one. You know, it's a hard job, but it's actually a really cool job too. I mean, I think all of us have really strived to get to the position of be able to fly in space, and so I think being so motivated to get to that place is really the same kind of drive that helps you get through all the training and help you perform in space flight. But I think the primary thing is that we're passionate about our job. We think it's very important, and there's a lot of people that count on us. You know, we are the most visible portion of human spaceflight, but it is a huge team, especially now that we use space station as an orbiting laboratory. There's lots of investigators on the ground, scientists on the ground that are supporting our experiments, and I think all of us feel obligated to do a good job for them.
I think I would just reiterate what Tim said there as well. I think as a first-time flyer, obviously there's a huge incentive of wanting to get to space and view planet Earth, and along the route, of course, I'm learning from my experienced crew members, and that helps me get into the correct mindset during the training of what I need to learn, but also knowing what I should expect on board and the conditions that I should expect on board the space station. And we work very closely together, not just as a crew, but in the whole astronaut office. And that's not just Houston, that's in Europe, in Canada, Japan, and Russia. And we really help each other out. And for me, that's been very important in the sort of mental preparation for getting to space.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I have a question. You say when you go to space, there's going to be a particular amount of experiments that you're working on. Is there any experiments that you know about that you hold like a personal stock in, like a cure for something, or something that you're an experiment that any one of you are really looking forward to see the results of?
Sure. You know, for me personally, I like the experiments that are hands-on, and several of the hands-on experiments are where we're the subject. So there are things that happen in zero gravity environment that we're still learning about. There's an effect on your eye health, on your bone density, on muscle strength, and a lot of the investigations that we're doing right now have a great potential to solve problems here on Earth, but also for us to be able to continue our exploration of space beyond low Earth orbit.
Again, to pick up from where Tim left off there as well, you know, the human physiology is great, and in addition to that, there's a couple of other experiments I'm really looking forward to. One of which is medical research. We're growing protein crystals in space, And the reason why we go to space to do that is because you have no sedimentation, no convection, and so you can grow large, pure crystals. And we then use spectroscopy to be able to identify the drugs, the best drugs that can counter those disease-causing proteins. And of course, the better the protein crystal, the better the drug. It's like a jigsaw piece matching together. So I think that's fascinating research and has huge potential. And additional, being a pilot, of course, I love engineering and technology. And some of the research we're doing with metal alloys, for example, using the electromagnetic levitator in the Columbus laboratory is very exciting research.
Do we have a few more from social media?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions from Instagram. Riley wants to know, for each of you, when did you decide to become an astronaut and what steps did you take to get where you are?
So I started a little bit late. I think I was about 6. And thankfully, the path that I took never precluded applying to be an astronaut. At some point, became more excited. So going to the schools that I went to, going to Georgia Tech was a great academic background, Navy Test Pilot School, and those things helped pave the way for me.
Yuri?
Ну, для меня эта профессия всегда была очень интересна, и в школьные годы, конечно, я думал о том, что было бы здорово стать космонавтом и когда-нибудь полететь в космос.
For me, this occupation was always very interesting, and in school I was thinking that it would be great to become a cosmonaut one day and fly into space.
Так что я пошел проходить обучение, чтобы стать военным летчиком, и таким путем я смог полететь в итоге в космос.
So I applied to the military pilot school and was accepted and trained in the military pilot school, and that was the path that I took to become a cosmonaut.
And I think it's actually quite rare that you have 3 people who are going to give you the same answer for this question. But likewise, for me, flying was an absolute passion as a young boy and as a teenager. I was flying solo before I could drive a car, and I decided early on that I wanted a career as a military pilot and an instructor and a test pilot, and that really just paved the way by going down that specialization to becoming an astronaut later in life.
We have another one on Instagram from Kevin. How is muscle and bone mass affected in space, and what are some safety precautions you take before takeoff?
So before takeoff, we need to make sure that we're healthy, that we understand the exercise protocol that we use on board, and that's really the main way that we're able to counteract both the loss of bone density and muscle mass. We exercise at least a couple hours every day, both weightlifting, which sounds strange to lift weights in space, but we have a very effective device that makes it feel just like lifting weights here on planet Earth. And then aerobic exercise, both a treadmill that we bungee down to and a bicycle. So those are really the main countermeasures we have.
Yes, Mark.
Mark wrote from Aviation Week for Tim Peake. You'll be the first from your country to spend time on the space station, I understand. What would you like that to mean, especially to the people of Great Britain, to see somebody in space from their country for that amount of time? Does it symbolize a growing interest in space in Great Britain? Does it just sort of catalyze the interest that's there? What do you kind of want that to mean to your countrymen?
Yes, it's a great question, and for me, it's very important that we've taken this step. And of course, the UK has always been part of the European Space Agency, but only recently has it been part of the human spaceflight program. And that really opens the door for Great Britain. It opens the door in terms of the scientific community that can now enjoy participating in the scientific research we do on board the space station. It also opens the door for UK industry to become involved in some of the engineering and technological work that's being done on board the space station. And as you're kind of alluding to as well, it's this element of educational outreach and inspiration. which hopefully will have a big impact in the UK and pave the way for our continued involvement in human spaceflight and exploration into the next few decades, which are looking incredibly exciting.
The gentleman in the back row.
Hey, my name is Mohammed Sarfullah from Georgia Tech. I think this is for all of the crew. You all have various background, collegiate background, of course. I know Tim Kopra, you went to West Point, and of course the best school in the world, Georgia Tech. So what is one key thing that you all take from your even military background, military school, that a key value and trait that helped you get here, and what you still hold value to you personally in your future missions?
I guess I could start with that. I would say the most important skill set for an astronaut is to be able to get along with others, especially now living on space station. So during astronaut selection, I think the folks that look at the candidates, in the back of their minds are thinking, who would I want to go camping with? You know, you want to have people that can get along. And frankly, any technical field benefits from people that can get along with others, because the team is much more effective than an individual.
Tim or Yuri?
I think Tim has answered the question perfectly there. And one thing that was quite noticeable with my European colleagues when we were selected in the class of 2009, we came from very different backgrounds: engineering, scientific, military as well. And we had all had some sort of experience working in a multicultural environment, in teamwork, leadership, followership type scenarios. And I certainly think that was a very strong characteristic that the Space Agency were looking for in all of their astronaut candidates.
Ну, я бы могу только добавить, я согласен с этими ответами, которые говорил Тим и Тим. Я могу добавить, что все-таки подготовка к полету и выполнение полетов занимает значительное время в жизни человека.
I can only add that I very much agree with the answers that Tim and Tim provided. I should say that training takes a lot of time in a person's life.
И вот это время работы в этой профессии, оно формирует людей уже именно в этой работе, такие специальные качества, которые нужны астронавтам.
And this time that people spend working and training that shapes people to have specific qualities that astronauts and cosmonauts are expected to have.
И тот опыт, который они получают, и работая вместе, и в разных условиях, он, конечно, формирует людей. И уже через 10 лет приблизительно это уже каждый человек имеет дополнительное качество, которое очень помогает нам работать вместе.
And this experience working together and training together over time shapes people in about 10 years for each person to have the qualities that are a great asset for us as a crew to work together.
And we have a call on the phone bridge. Sarah?
Hi, this is Sarah Lewin from Space.com, and I was wondering what has been the most challenging aspect of training.
Most challenging aspect of training, I think from a physical standpoint, we train really hard in the neutral buoyancy lab for spacewalks. It's a challenging job, but all of us get to a place where we're ready to go outside and do a real spacewalk. In terms of the overall training pace, it's a bit of a challenge to do all the travel that we currently have for space training, for space flight. I've spent a lot of time in Russia. Tim has as well, and spent a good bit of time both in Japan and Europe, and Yuri spent time in those locations as well. So it's something that's part of the job, and we eventually get used to.
Okay. Yes, sir.
For the entire crew, what are y'all most looking forward to on y'all's time there? There's been recently, a lot of the astronauts have been sharing photos on Twitter. So is that one of the things? Or?
I mean, for me as a rookie astronaut, it's got to be going to the cupola and looking down on planet Earth. And I doubt that that experience will ever leave you, and it's probably something that these guys are equally looking forward to as well, because it is such a unique privilege. Living and working in weightlessness as well is going to be, incredibly exciting. I've only experienced it very briefly when we do our parabolic flight training in the back of aircraft. But to actually let your entire body adapt to this new environment and to experience sleeping and eating and working, I mean, that's just going to be amazing.
And one more operational question. When the mission commander says, Tim, you do it, how do you tell which one? Or do you have different call signs?
You know, we actually don't have call signs, but I think the way that it'll work is, especially when it's the ground, if they want our attention, I think they'll use first and last name, and then from then on out, it'll just be conversational. I think it's going to work out.
Eric.
Yeah, Eric Berger again with the Chronicle. Question for anyone who wants to tackle it. So you guys are going to be a couple hundred miles over Earth, kind of looking down. And in this country, there's a big debate now about borders and fences. And in Europe, there's a big debate about migrants and war-torn Syria that involves Russia as well. What message does the space station with these international partners kind of coming together in space, what message would you like to see that send to the world, I guess, that faces these myriad problems?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's not so much about looking down the planet and borders or not seeing borders. To me, the message is the fact that we have a very international crew, and behind each one of those crew members is an entire team and a set of organizations that support that crew member and the science that's being conducted on board. So for me, the message is that we can work together in a very effective and successful way. It's just a matter of having the resolve to make that happen.
Any other questions in the room? Do we have any more for social media, Megan?
Yeah, we have another one on Twitter from Kelly Bentubo. What's the first thing you want to do in space that's not a mission task?
First thing that's not a mission task. I'm looking forward to just calling friends and family and having the opportunity to share the experience as much as possible. So I think that's going to be amazing to be able to, to speak to people. And it's really a testament of, how far the space station has come now that we have this great communication link back down to Earth, that we can actually call friends and family at any time.
And then another one from Alberta's science teacher. My students want to know, what science lab would you design aboard the space station if you could design one? An experiment maybe you would dream to try and wander in space.
Wow, that's a tough question. Right now we have 100 US-based experiments, 160 that are internationally based, 50 are new during this expedition. So that really covers a huge gamut. I think that it's more of the kid inside me than it is really an experiment, but it's a lot of fun to play with water, because without the surface tension, or with the surface tension but not the gravitational effect, water is a very strange thing in space, and it's just fun to play with and try to understand it better.
Yes, James.
I'd like to do a follow-up question on the question of borders and leaving the borders behind. When you're operating in space, are there any operational or procedural constraints for any of you to be in any section of the station?
No.
Or not?
No.
Because there are some stories about that, and I want to ask people who know. Thank you.
Sure.
Any others from the room? Yes, ma'am.
This is for Tim, and it's just playing off of some of the Tim Peake, I should clarify. I'm a NASA intern, and just to play off some other questions, being the first Brit in space, is there anything besides having your couple cups of tea a day that you will do, any days of celebration to honor everybody back home?
Yes, I mean, I'm English, and so there'll be St. George's Day, which I will celebrate in March. But I would just like to say I'm not the first Brit in space. We had Helen Sharman fly in 1991, but of course the first Brit represented by the UK government. Other than that, I think our holidays are fairly equal in terms of we'll obviously celebrate Christmas and New Year. But no, nothing sort of stands out other than that.
Any other questions in the room? Yes, sir.
I'm Kyle with the Wounded Warriors. I got a fun question for y'all. I know you guys can't really have like your last meal right before you take off, but what meal would you want when you guys come back? What's going to be your first meal to go for? And then do you guys also diet right before you go, since you're going to be living on that space food? Thank you.
So before we go, we're very well fed in Baikonur. In fact, we went as the backup crew, and we were there for, I guess, nearly 2 weeks. And the food was actually outstanding. So it wasn't a particular diet. We're just well fed. And in terms of favorite meal coming home, I wouldn't mind a good steak and a fresh salad.
And I've heard that pizza is something that the crew craves. In fact, we had the opportunity to speak to the crew recently just as part of our handover training, and that was something we said, is there anything we can do to help you guys out, anything we can bring up that you might need? And pizza was the only request.
Yuri?
Ну, после полета, конечно, любая пища будет для вас желанной, если только она полностью свежая. Поэтому все что угодно, но полностью свежее.
You know, after flight, any food is very tasty if it's fresh. So any fresh food is highly craved.
Yes, sir.
Mohammed again from Group Tech. This question is to each one of you all. Out of the 160 experiments, is there any experiments out the whole list of them that just draws out to you that you're excited to work on?
Well, you know, we wouldn't want to make the principal investigators jealous. You know, the different sciences, you know, so of course we don't have a favorite. It's like having a favorite child.
Good answer.
You know, I think if you think about our role on space station, we're more like a lab technician and a facility manager more often than we are a scientist. Because a lot of these experiments either require a little bit of help from us to get it set up, or perhaps they're external from the vehicle and we don't have involvement. You know, me personally, I like the things where I can set it up myself and it's hands-on. We have one experiment where we use ultrasound. We have coordination with a person on the ground that's helping us guide the ultrasound device. That's pretty darn cool. And the same thing for ocular health or eye health. We actually take pictures of inside our eyes real time, and being able to have that capability on station is pretty neat.
For myself as well, those experiments are great. I mentioned a couple of experiments I'm really excited about, the protein crystals and the metal alloys. And also, all things going well, I'll have the opportunity to install a furnace into the Japanese module, which is quite a large piece of hardware, and then we'll subsequently run experiments looking at flame combustion and also melting alloys and composite materials. So that kind of thing I think is great when you get the opportunity to actually install something for the first time and then subsequently run the experiments.
Any others in the room?
Для меня, конечно, у нас большое количество экспериментов, их можно условно разделить на группы. Для меня всегда представляло интерес те эксперименты, которые связаны с наблюдением за Землей из космоса.
For myself, I should say we run a lot of experiments on board. We can break them down into relative groups, and I am particularly interested in the group that deals with observations of Earth from space.
И это не только наблюдение за тем, что происходит на поверхности Земли, но также в атмосфере и в ионосфере.
And it's not just the observations of the Earth's surface, but of the events in the Earth's atmosphere and the ionosphere.
И в этих экспериментах используется большое количество различных приборов. Ну, например, наблюдая за теми явлениями, которые происходят в ионосфере, собираются данные, архив, и таким образом, анализируя их на большом промежутке времени, можно делать, видеть, какие изменения происходят, например, перед землетрясениями, во время и после, и это поможет прогнозировать такие явления на Земле.
We are using a lot of instruments for these observations. For example, when we're researching the ionosphere around the Earth, we can archive data, and then we can study long stretches of time and compare data, and we can see how it changes before an earthquake, during and after the earthquake, and we can attempt to forecast these events in the future.
И участвуя в таких экспериментах, астронавт обязательно выполняет видеосъемку, фотосъемку Земли, просто наблюдает за Землей в зависимости от типа эксперимента. И вот эта возможность видеть Землю, обращать внимание на какие-то детали, это очень увлекательное занятие.
And the astronaut has an opportunity to take photographs and videos of the Earth, to look down and observe the Earth, and it is a fascinating task to be noticing some details down on Earth.
Any other questions? Yes.
I know you said you had your tea to remind you of Britain, but since you two up there are the only veterans of space, what type of drink or tradition do you have to help you cope with or remind you of home when you guys are in space?
You know, we live inside at night. We sleep in a small crew quarters. It's about the size of a refrigerator, which sounds really small, but it's actually about perfect for living in, you know, for that time period when it's night and you're going to sleep. And for me, having photographs of your family on the walls and those kind of memories are really important.
Да, я тоже какое-то небольшое количество маленьких сувениров, которые напоминают о семье, о доме, о стране, в которой ты живешь. Такие вещи.
Yes, and I also bring a small number of souvenirs, small souvenirs that remind me of my home, of my country, of my family.
I think we have another social media question.
We have another one from Daniel on Instagram. What do you plan to do in your free time while you're in space?
Free time in space. You know, I think Tim already hit on this, and that is be able to call your friends and family. It's pretty neat to be able to talk to them, but I think your friends and family think it's pretty special when they get a call from the International Space Station. And then being able to take photographs of the planet is just an amazing thing. I wasn't that into photography before I flew before, but I'm absolutely fascinated with it now, so I'm sure I'll be taking lots of pictures.
Tim?
Yeah, just to add to what Tim says, I think taking photographs is great. Look forward to sharing the mission as much as possible, including social media, tweeting out pictures, and also in my spare time running a couple of really neat educational programs. I'm going to have a couple of little AstroPi computers up there, which school kids are going to program for me. So that'll be quite interesting to see what they come up with. They've got cameras on them, they've got accelerometers, humidity, temperature, pressure sensors, etc. So that kind of thing I'll be doing in my spare time as well.
That's awesome. Do you plan to use the amateur radio at all, any of you?
Sure.
Of course, yeah, definitely.
James.
A follow-up question on the little bedrooms on the Cayuta, but where you're sleeping. Actually, when you get there, all the bedrooms will be occupied. One day, where will you guys sleep until you get rid of the other crew?
I think we'll just find a place. It's a big station. So I think we'll find a place to hang our sleeping bag and keep our personal stuff in some place during that transition. We'll probably sleep inside our crew quarters or the Cayuta, and then we'll see them go back home.
But there's 2 Russians to stay there, so where will you sleep, even once this room? Is there a small bedroom in the other segment?
Ну, на тот период, когда нас будет 9 человек, Я планирую где-то временно разместиться. Это где-то примерно 10 дней.
When we have 5 people on board, I'm planning to find a place somewhere temporarily. It will be for about 10 days.
И у нас уже большой опыт, много мест, где можно хорошо провести время ночью.
We have a vast experience, previous experience. There are a lot of spots where you can find a comfortable spot for the night.
Такие места есть и на российском сегменте, и на американском, и других представителей. Так что есть много выбора.
Such locations are available both on the Russian segment and the US segment in the segments of other partners. So there is a choice.
Yes, ma'am.
Is sleep different in space? You know, you're tossing and turning. Do you dream the same even?
Sleep is different in space. You know, in fact, sometimes I think you sleep better when there's zero gravity, but sometimes you don't. And a lot of crew members try to find a position inside the crew quarters where you put your back in contact with the wall to make it feel more natural. So that's one of the main differences. In terms of dreams, you know, I think some people eventually stay long enough where they dream in zero gravity. That's sort of a major milestone, I think.
Any other questions from Johnson? Yes, sir.
My question is, you guys as prior service guys, and you're kind of the new guy there. Is there a rite of passage?
Maybe some crews, but not so much on ours.
I guess I'll find out.
Anything else from the room? Yes, sir.
This question is dedicated to both Tims. I know, Tim Peake, this is your first flight to the International Space Station. And Tim Kopra, you had a flight before for 2 months. Now your flight, this flight will be 5 months, approximately 5 months. Do you think, what obstacles do you see in the near future in staying for a long duration flight this time?
What obstacles?
The obstacles do you see, if any?
You know, I don't think there are specific obstacles, because by the time we fly, we were extremely well trained, both for going uphill in the Soyuz, for any sort of circumstance that's nominal on board, and even off nominal, the things, you know, where things could potentially go wrong on station. I think that's one of the greatest parts about the training team that we have, and that's that by the time you fly, you're really ready for the mission.
I'd completely agree, and I think the only obstacles we still have to overcome are the ones where we're working towards the longer space exploration journeys to Mars, for example, where radiation shielding will come into play, countermeasures. We're already really developing some great countermeasures so that astronauts and cosmonauts who are landing today are much fitter and healthier and able to work much more quickly than they were 10 years ago. But of course, when we're looking at that Mars mission, then the astronauts need to arrive in good shape after a long journey. So these are the kind of things we're working towards. But we're, you know, overcoming these challenges, and it's exciting to be part of that program too.
Mark.
Mark, for Aviation Week. Did you sort of, are you sort of at the end of your U.S. NASA training at this point, or close to it? What's out there before you head to Baikonur?
We have about 1 more week of crew training with both Yuri, Tim here before they go off, Tim to Europe and Yuri back to Russia. We'll do some emergency training on board the mock-ups in Building 9 for Space Station. And then after that, a lot of it is baseline data collection for the different experiments that we participate in. And then the next big milestone really are exams in Russia, when Yuri and I have a set of exams for me as left seat, Yuri as commander, and then all 3 of us in the Soyuz simulator and then Space Station mock-up.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Mike going to American Space for Tim Kopra. Your last mission was on the shuttle, and now you're going up on Soyuz. What are you? Could you explain some of the differences that you feel between?
So my role in the Soyuz is expanded because as the left seater, I work essentially as a co-pilot. Before, on STS-127, I was on the middeck, so not much of a role going uphill or downhill. And then on 133, which I trained for, I was mission specialist 2, which is essentially the quarterback. So in this sense, I think my role is a little bit more complicated, and so it required more time in Russia for that training. You know, I have a lot of respect for the Soyuz vehicle. It's big enough, and it does its job well enough that it can make it through the entire sequence of launch and landing in a safe manner. You know, in the shuttle days, there were several zones in which your life was in peril and there wasn't much you could do about it. Whereas the Soyuz, it's designed so that every portion of the launch and the landing has contingencies where the crew's going to be safe. So I really respect that.
Yes.
Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com again. Right now, as we're sitting here in London, they're having the world premiere of The Martian, and there's strongs of people, according to the Twitter updates, lined up. What does it say about society that the public might be more aware of, pay more attention to a fictional journey to Mars than what's currently going on in space, or maybe more aware of the adventures of Mark Watney versus the adventures of Tim and Yuri? Is that something that needs to be changed, or is that the natural progression of spaceflight over the past 50 years?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, we've had a spate of Hollywood movies with Gravity and Interstellar and now The Martian. And I think the fact that the public is interested in space and space exploration is wonderful. They will always be looking ahead because that's where it's most interesting and most exciting to kind of project to the future. And what we're doing is also working on that journey, but obviously lagging behind in terms of science fiction. That's been the case for so many years. But no, I think it's wonderful that the general public is so aware of space and space exploration as a whole. And hopefully what we can do is help to use our missions today on the International Space Station and explain that what we're doing right now is actually directly involved in that journey to asteroids, to Moon, and to Mars.
So for a photo op and a show of hands, if there was a 2-year rescue mission to Mars right now, which of you would like to go?
Well, I'd go.
A 2-year rescue mission.
Yeah. All right.
I will take one last question from social media.
All right, we have one on Twitter from Rebecca Davison. So you've told us why you wanted to become an astronaut and when you decided, but what was the selection process like and what were the main stages? And is there anything about it that particularly stood out to you?
You know, the process has changed over time, and I'm probably most familiar with the current selection process in terms of how it's evolved. Interestingly, now we went from about 6,000 down to this last class of 8 people, which is an amazing selection process to get from this huge group. And it's done in stages where they find the people that meet basic requirements, the basic educational requirements, and then getting down to a place where they could interview just a handful of people. And now they have 2 interview processes, the first of which is to make sure that they're medically qualified and that you'd like to bring them back. And then the second one, in large measure, is to find out what kind of person they are. Is that the person that would be best suited for long-duration space flight?
Tim or Yuri?
I think it's interesting that each space agency has their own different ways of managing the selection process. But ultimately, they end up evaluating the same type of characteristics. Certainly in the 2009 class, it was very interesting because at the same time that Europe was having a selection, Canada, Japan, and NASA were having a selection as well. And all going through slightly different methods. It was interesting to talk to our Canadian colleagues and hear about some of the firefighting skills and water survival drills they were going through. I think we got a much easier time in Europe, but we certainly got put through our paces in terms of things like psychological profiling, for example, and soft skills such as communication and teamwork, leadership, followership, that kind of thing. But looking amongst the sort of worldwide astronaut, cosmonaut corps, I think that all the agencies do a very good job at the end of the day, no matter how they get there, of selecting people with very similar characteristics that are suitable for spaceflight.
Yuri?
Oh,
Any other questions in the room? And if you're on the phone bridge, again, if you press *1 if you have a question. Well, thank you for being part of the Expedition 4647 Crew News Conference. You can find Tim Kopra on Twitter at @astro_Tim and Tim Peake at @astro_Tim Peake. You can also follow the crew members' flight experiences on Instagram if you go to instagram.com/ISS. And for more information on the International Space Station, please go to www.nasa.gov/station. Thank you.